Hello friends, I'm Chromatic Sauce and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video I have drawn this horse and I'm just gonna outline and color it in for you. So first I'm starting out by erasing my pencil lines just so I can kind of see what the paper looks like a little bit more. A lot of times when I draw things with pencil, the pencil kind of distracts or adds to the image in a way that looks good, but then when I erase the pencil, then I realized that my outlines just look terrible. That's the main reason why I wanted to erase a lot of my sketchy outlines, because the sketchiness of the pencil really does add to the image, and I knew I didn't want the pencil to be part of the final image. I wanted to very clearly see what my marker outlines looked like. So if you're ever struggling with your outlines, maybe try to erase some of your pencil outlines first. In this drawing, I was using two different sizes of the Micron felt tip pens, and the first one that I did my main boulder outlines and filling in a lot of the larger black areas was the size 08, and then this smaller one that I'm currently using is the size 02, which is a lot smaller. And basically after I got my slightly bolder outline done, that's when I went in on the face with this thinner marker to outline the shapes of the shading. So I have outlines in the eye of the highlight. I'm outlining the shapes of the highlights on the face and the shadows on the face. I definitely got this style from looking at new school drawings of animals on Instagram. A lot of times they will outline the shapes and then fill them in cool and bold ways, and I really like the way it looks, and that's why I wanted to give that a try. I wanted to give outlines to the shapes of the highlights and lowlights on the face because I feel like it gives it a cool detail and a cool dimension, and without these lines on the face there wouldn't really be much going on because it's not like there's a lot of long hair on the face of the horse. So it would just be a lot of those bigger outlines on the outside and not a whole lot of detail on the rest of the face. So I feel like those small outlines help give a little bit more detail to the face without even any color being in there. Then I moved on to the hair. I was using the same small marker to add some dimension to the mane. I started out on each section by starting at the tips and just creating hairlines coming from the tips of each little section of the hair. I feel like the detail just on the tips of the hair and then slight lines throughout really gave a cool effect. And then I also added extra lines and a slight amount of hash marks where I thought there would be shading. So anytime a clump of hair was underneath a section, I would add extra lines and definitely add lines for the hair strokes there. But I didn't want to overdo it. I didn't want it to be just lines going through the whole thing. I definitely left highlights there. And once I was done filling in the sections of hair, I took my eraser to erase the oval because I was going to go in with watercolors. I also made sure I erased all of the pencil from the horse because I know you can't really erase pencils too frequently underneath things like markers or watercolors, and I wanted to make sure I wouldn't accidentally permanently stain the paper with pencil. But then I sort of erased too much of this oval and I couldn't see it anymore, so I had to try my best to redraw it, but this time a lot lighter, so I didn't have to go back in with the needed eraser. I just gave myself a crisper line. And then I went in with the watercolor that they gave us in the April sketch box, which was this really pretty shimmery blue that I was just in love with. I really wanted to make this horse white, and honestly it didn't really work out for me, but I thought a white horse would look really pretty on top of this really shimmery blue. I just had a vision and I was super excited once I started applying this. Because when I initially started the drawing, I kind of wanted to use this watercolor, but I didn't really have any other watercolors to use, so I was kind of hesitant, and that's why I didn't use watercolor paper, but it is mixed media paper, and I'd say it held up pretty well to the watercolor on top. The paper didn't really hold up incredibly to being slightly overworked with the watercolor. Since I'm not really that skilled with watercolor, I definitely overworked some sections of the paper. Not too bad. I was anticipating some troubles with the mixed media paper and not watercolor. I'm not really that skilled with watercolor, so that's why I was really hesitant to use it, on top of not having very many color options. But I just couldn't help myself with this blue because it was so pretty with the shimmers and stuff. So basically, I'm just trying my very best to make this as flat of a color as possible. You see me accidentally making the top part a little bit too dark soon, so I have to go back down to the bottom, all the while trying to get enough water to spread it out and not leave stains. I didn't want to leave any puddling, but I also didn't want to have too much water on the paper. Since it is mixed media paper and not watercolor paper, it doesn't really support a whole lot of water on it. Another thing I'll add about that is I didn't have the right kind of tape. If I had artist tape, I would have taped every single side of the paper down to help prevent the wrinkling that happens with watercolor paper and any paper that gets wet. But I didn't have that tape. All I had was this little thin tape. And basically, I just went with it and hoped that the paper wasn't going to buckle too much. And it didn't do too bad of a job. It buckled a little bit, but it wasn't too much more than I really expected for this paper and the tape that I had to secure it. So after I let the blue dry enough, I didn't want it to be too wet to where things would bleed into it. I went in with this black watercolor stick, and this is sort of where the drawing was getting away from me. As I said earlier, I did want to make this a white horse. I wanted it to be sort of ethereal. I don't really know what ethereal means. I wanted it to be really like gray tones and really pretty white horse with some like warmish gray tones throughout. And I just wanted it to be really pretty and go with the blue really nicely. But then my skills, or lack thereof, sort of caught up with me with this one, because as I was trying to add some like watercolory details here, I wasn't that successful. Honestly, it wasn't too bad. I think my light parts were too light for the dark parts. I think hair that's really light gray probably wouldn't have quite as many really dark sections in it, so that's where it was a disadvantage. But I wasn't really sure what I was doing or how to do it properly, so here I am. I'm just darkening it up. Anywhere I have those shady lines, I basically added the watercolor. I tried to leave the white highlights out, the parts with no lines. I tried to leave them out a little bit more, or at least give them a lighter wash of color than the other sections. And then I also tried to add hair strokes a little bit with this watercolor as well, which kind of worked, but it could have been a lot more successful if I had a little bit more skills with watercolor and a little bit more confidence in knowing exactly what I was doing, because I had a vision, but I was not sure how to execute it with the materials I had. Honestly, if I had a lighter color, grayish tone, I would have been using that instead of straight up black, but obviously when I have a black utensil in my hand, I just can't help but getting my blacks in. That's usually what I do. I get my blacks in first. So I went in way too dark, way too fast with this one, which, you know, it was entirely my fault. I don't know if you can tell, I'm not exactly pleased with how this drawing ended up. I'm a little disappointed, and I really want to retry with this one, but I figured I would just share it anyway because I don't think it turned out looking too terrible. I think I'm just a little bit hard on myself. But if you can see here, I did use this watercolor and I sort of embraced the dark color. I definitely had to go back down a little bit on those first sections I worked on to darken up the parts that I left a little bit too white for the rest of it, since I made everything else a solid gray. I didn't really leave any white at this point. But basically, I just went full in with this pigment and darkened up every underside of a little flip and just tried to make it look good. And then I was really nervous, but I wanted to try my warm toned gray, and this is where it was like instant regret. Well, maybe not instantly. I hoped I could pull it off at this point still, but my color combinations were not amazing. I didn't have any watercolors. As you can tell, I'm literally just using everything that I got from the April sketch box from one of my last videos. And so this is no different. I'm still using the black watercolor stick that came in that box, but I'm also using the orange ink that came, and I'm mixing them a little bit and diluting it with water. And it was going okay until I added this really, really dark section right in the middle of the face. And that's really when I knew I was gonna have to embrace making this a darker horse. I really didn't want to make a brown horse. I don't know really how this happened. I was trying to make a white horse that had really pretty warm gray tones, but my skills with mixing orange and black didn't go to plan. As you can see, this is just straight up brown, and it's pretty dark. I think the way to go with watercolor is to do really light sections first. Tell me if I'm wrong. I gotta look this up because watercolor is so pretty. I just don't get it. But I think you have to do really light sections first and let them dry a little bit, and then go back in with darker and darker sections and build things up slowly. And I think it's always the wet mediums that get away with me. The same thing happened with the dandelion. I don't know why I didn't learn my lesson from that video, where I just can't control myself. And then, yeah, I just kept adding more and more dark, because that was the only thing I could do, since the middle of that section in the middle of the face was so dark. But basically, I finished it off camera, and it almost looks like an evil horse because the eye is so like reddish toned. And then I left it like it was, and then I decided I think this would look a lot better if the hair was a lot darker and a lot browner, because it doesn't make sense that this brown horse has really light gray hair. At least, I guess I don't know that much about horses, but I feel like usually their manes sort of go with the color of the rest of their hair. I don't really know, but I thought, at least in this case, making it a little bit darker would work. So I got this brown marker that's a little bit reddish in tone. So not just straight up brown, like a really like not quite maroon, but pretty brown. And I just went to fill in the mane with this. I had already given up, and I really wanted to just redo this one. But here we are, and I'm just filling it all in, all of the hair. And then by the time I was done filling in the hair, I wanted to add a little bit more dimension, so I just took the marker a couple times in the darker sections just to try to build up a little bit of pigment. So once it dried, I basically just took the same marker in some of the darker sections, and I don't know if it really added too much dimension. The dimension was already there, but I feel like it added a little bit more richness to the drawing and a little bit more depth to the drawing where there wasn't. And now that I added the extra color in the mane, I really like how the horse is looking by itself, but not really so much on the background. But let me know what you think down in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to see me retry this horse, and let's see if I can actually make a white horse this time. And subscribe so you can see me draw other kinds of animals, and whatever you want, just leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram too, @ChromaticSauce. And thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know if you want a print of this one. I will be sure to send it on over. Just hit me up in an email or in a DM on Instagram. Bye!